Well, hello, everybody. Thanks for joining again for the next in our series on managing the human aspects of change management and team optimization. This is the fourth in our series of sessions focused on attaining certification as a change management professional. And today we're going to be zeroing in on certain aspects that have to do with really building the case for change, which is a key critical component of managing change, both in the early stages and gaining early adoption, as we talked about in our prior session, as well as helping to bridge the gap and get over the hump, if you will, to be able to really gain momentum and engage everyone in your organization for the long haul. And so my name's Diana Willis. I'm the founder and CEO of the Pendolino Group. We are focused in on this very interesting topic of change management. This is an area that a number of our clients have come forward and have asked for assistance in this particular area. It may be a spot that you're working in, particularly if you're leading an initiative within your organization. If you've been chartered to lead a business process initiative, continuous improvement culture, to even introduce a new program to your organization or bring change to a functional area. No change is too small, I like to say. So those things that you may be comfortable with making modifications to, bringing change into your team, into your organization, into the way that work is done, others may actually find it to be quite unsettling. And so that's what we need to keep in front of us as change management professionals, that every change is significant by its own right. And so we want to make sure that we take the time to methodically lay the groundwork, get people enrolled, get the top leadership enrolled in the organization, involve people in the organization, help us leap over the chasm, and ultimately, one of the ways that we do that is through the tool of making the formal case. So today what we're going to do is a deep dive here around the key aspects of making the case for change, what that looks like, what the key elements are of that case for change, and also how to marshal leadership and your team members from within the business so that you actually have more momentum to be able to build and sustain a change initiative. One of the things that we know is true at the foundation of this, one of our principles is going to be that individuals in the organization, everyone's inherently rational, right? And so we need to anticipate that all aspects of change will be questioned. And we actually want that. We want to invite that. Because ultimately, your ability to address those questions and to effectively enroll people in what you're creating, the vision for what's being created, that's what will ultimately determine your success or failure in any change initiative. Also, the articulation of a formal case for change is critical. All too often, I think we see teams will embark on an initiative. They'll bring in a new tool. They'll bring in a new program, a best practice. They'll take on doing a bit of work in a different way, change a business process. And sometimes it's done informally. And unfortunately, that can often end up stalling out or causing a stall out in what you are attempting to do. And so having a formal case and articulating that is absolutely critical. And we're going to go into what those pieces are as well. And then lastly, the creation of a written vision statement. This, with change, it really is an opportunity, a truly invaluable opportunity to be able to articulate a powerful vision statement around where you're headed, and to even leverage the heritage of your organization and the history of your organization, what makes it truly unique, to leverage that in articulating the new vision. All right, so we're going to go through 3 key steps in how to develop the case for change and what that looks like. I've got a great case study to share with you today as well, and so let's go ahead and dive in. So where we are on our path here, we it started out by addressing the human side, recognizing that we need to address the human side of change as systematically as we address the technical aspects of change, or the business process aspects of change, or the organization aspects, organization design aspects. So the same way that we apply a systematic approach to that, we need to address the human side of that. And that's what this certification is about. The next piece is starting at the top. We went through what that looks like and why that's critical, because everyone at the top of the organization as well, they are also going through the change. And unfortunately, we sometimes will miss that, as obvious as it sounds while I'm saying it. So we start at the top, of course, in doing that, and talk through a bit of what that looks like in our prior session. Then we explored how to involve every layer of the organization. What does that look like? And some methods for actually involving every layer. So today, we're going to do a deep dive around the formal case for change. And then that will tee us up as we continue on through the remainder of the sessions here. All right. So for those of you who are new and just stepping in at this session, just to give you a quick sense of what we do, this is a snap session. So we move quickly through the content. We're going to go through some best practices, the evolutionary nature of change. We'll also go through some of the methodologies around, specifically even in a BPM organization, business process management context, continuous improvement context. So I know some of you are joining me today from that perspective. We've done work together around building out a business process management environment or business process methodology. And so, so I've got a couple of pieces in here as well from that lens. And then, of course, an open discussion, and we'll take a look at what our next section is. So diving in deeper now, the case for change. And so there are 3 crucial steps that are evident in all effective cases. So in other words, if we look at some examples, and I'll share a case study with you as I mentioned in a moment, if we look at some examples of change that has been managed phenomenally well, sure, there may have been some bumps along the way, but there was truly a sense of purpose in the way that the change was managed. When we look at those, we're able to distill 3 crucial steps consistently that show up. And so it's with that, and we want to think about these as best practices. So what I'd like you to do is to think about in your own organization right now. Perhaps it's a project that you're working on, that you're responsible for. You're leading a particular change in the organization, and you've been chartered with that responsibility for your team or for your business. So I want you to think about that right now. And as I go through these 3 best practices, these 3 crucial elements, assess for yourself the degree to which these have been applied, or you've actually done these things. And you know, maybe to some degree or less. Okay. So the first crucial step is confronting reality, and being able to brutally confront reality and articulate a convincing need for change. I don't really distinguish, and you don't need to distinguish, between a change that's coming by virtue of a crisis versus a change that is coming by virtue of a desire to go to the next level and improve upon what we are doing. Okay, so the first item is confronting reality and articulating a convincing need for change. So just think about your own project, your own initiative for the moment, and assess the degree to which this has been done. Okay, that's the first one. The second practice, best practice, is a demonstrated faith that the company or the team has a viable future and the leadership to get there. So now you might look at this and say, well, of course we've got a future. Well, keep in mind that even if you are bringing a new business process methodology to your organization, that represents change, and there will be some people in the organization that will question what was wrong with what we were doing. And so it's in that context that you need to be able to demonstrate the faith and the commitment that there is a better future that is there to be had, and that the leadership is in place to get there. Okay, so that's what we want to be thinking about here. All right, the third and final best practice, the third crucial step, is providing a roadmap to guide behavior and decision making. All right, so what do I mean by that? Well, again, coming back to that, that what we've seen, that often change is informal, and we don't necessarily take the time to step back and put a plan in place. And so as a result, there is we just kind of get this scattershot of behavior, and often when decisions need to be made, it's not clear who has the authority to make the decisions or what the methodology for decision making will be. Will it be consensus oriented, for example? So those are the kinds of things that you need to also be answering here. So these are three best practices when you look at exceptional examples of change that has taken place, whether it is, in your opinion, large scale or small and minor. When you dissect those, you will find these three crucial steps evident in all of those cases. All right, so go ahead, grab a screenshot of this one if you like. I think it's a great one for you to just keep handy and assess yourself, your own change initiative against this periodically as you move through time, okay? So let me give you a little bit of a case study. I mentioned that I'll share something with you to kind of bring it into a reality here, if you will. So I want you to put yourself in this scenario. And some of you may have had this type of scenario happen depending on how long you've been in industry and the types of organizations that you've worked with and the types of industries that you've worked with, given certain nature. So put yourself in this scenario. So in this particular case, this just happened to be a consumer packaged goods company, rather large one actually, and they were experiencing years of steadily declining earnings. Okay, and so their performance was really stagnated. They were losing market share just steadily. Okay, so it wasn't a dramatic shift; it was just slowly chipping away at it. But it was a very, very concerning situation, and becoming more and more so. And as a result of assessing that situation, they determined that they needed to restructure their operations. Okay, so let me share with you what happened and the impact of it, and then I'm going to go into it deeper and share a little bit about the methodology that they used and the practices that they used, so you can see this in action, these best practices. So ultimately what happened was that they ended up conducting the largest downsizing in the history of the company. And this was an organization still around and had, at the time, had been around for about 125 years, so quite well established. And they conducted the largest downsizing, taking the risk of having a shell-shocked staff and an entire ecosystem of vendors, suppliers, and customers left with question marks. That was the risk of their actions, okay? The result, though, that they achieved was that they conducted this action. They actually ended up creating a renewed resolve from everyone, employees, vendors, suppliers, customers alike. Everyone came out of this event, if you will, renewed with resolve to help the enterprise advance and return to a thriving state of growth. Okay, so that's the context, all right, and what they achieved. And ultimately, again, whether it's on a large scale or a small scale for yourself, this is about change management. Don't you agree it would be fantastic when you come out to your organization and state, here's what we need to do, here's where we're headed, here's the vision, we're committed to it, this is the impact it's going to have, here are the steps, the milestones, how decisions are going to be made, this is what we're going to do, and the reaction, the response that you get from the organization is renewed resolve from everyone. That's what we're going after, right? So from that standpoint, now let's dissect it. Let's take a look at some of the things that they did, okay? First of all, they were very methodical and thoughtful in their approach. So they took a systematic approach to the human aspects, and they moved with what I will call intention and attention. Intention and deliberate with where they were headed, what they needed to do, facing the reality of it, and attention to the human aspects. So tactically, for a series of sessions, offsites that took place with the entire executive team, so your entire core team, whoever that is, to have that kind of time, to have that conversation off-site or to the side, to have that and deliberately build out what I call a brutally honest business case. So a brutally honest business case in this particular case study, it was a case that downsizing was the only way to remain viable. And so you're going for building a brutally honest business case for change. Why the need for change? Why does continuous improvement and that kind of culture matter? Why do the business processes that are being utilized today, why don't they work in the going forward? Why do we need to automate? The brutally honest business case around it, because you're going to take that and be transparent with it. You are going to be free in sharing what that business case is. And in that, draw upon your company's heritage. So in this particular case, they drew upon the company's heritage. They recognized that the organization had grown to the place where it had grown because of the commitment that people had, the deep sense of pride that they had in the organization. So think about the things that make your organization unique. Is it that you pride yourselves on innovation? Is it that you pride yourselves on creativity, bringing fresh new ideas into the organization? Is it that you pride yourself on the customer experience? What are those things? And that's what you want to draw upon. That's the energy that you're drawing upon so that you can craft a compelling vision that is built upon what's new, what's going to be new, and supported by this honest business case that needs to change, okay? So you can see how this starts to come together. The next thing that they did was that they paid attention. They helped every single employee, suppliers, customers, everyone understand the necessity for change. They had those conversations, and they were transparent again with the business case. They were transparent with the intention and the culture, the heritage of the organization, and tapping into that. So they really acted in alignment with that and sharing their vision. Okay, so that's what you want to go after. And with that, you now have people enrolled, and you are able to motivate the organization. And in fact, in this particular case, they motivated the entire ecosystem around the change, which was quite substantial again, as you can tell from this example. So this case study, I think, really does provide for us a nice learning lab to be able to distill those best practices that we talked about, distill those and what it looks like in action. Go ahead and grab a screenshot of this one as well. It's another outstanding one for you to have in your back pocket again as you are leading a change initiative within your own organization. All right. So let's take a look at a tool we visited in one of our prior certifications for business process management. And I want to bring this one forward again in the broader context of change and change management. It applies regardless of the topic of change or what the specifics are of the change. It applies in all cases of change, I guess is a better way to say it. So from this standpoint, if you're seeing this for the first time, what I want you to focus on is on the right-hand side here, Oh, as you are managing change and helping to lead your organization through the change curve, these are the things that you want to be listening for. These types of indicators are what I call subjective evidence that there is an underlying structure or systematic element that is missing in your plan. And so if we look back at what are those best practices that we just looked at a few slides ago, we can use the evidence or those things that are emerging in the organization, what we're hearing coming from people in the organization. We can use these to actually reverse engineer and figure out which one of the elements of the best practice we should focus on so that we keep our system of change, we keep that whole, and we keep the integrity in that system and are able to continue to evolve and move the organization forward, okay? So what do I mean by that? So let's imagine we're seeing this here. Well, let me build out the rest of this chart real quick. And based on what we see or what we hear on this side, we are able to actually reverse engineer and dissect what might be missing, where I might want to spend some time in backfilling, if you will, or returning my system of change back to a state of integrity so everything is there and whole and complete. So what I mean by that is that serious change will absolutely occur when we have clarity of the vision, so we know where we're headed, we have the skills in place and the motivation to make this happen, we have brought to bear leadership, the resources to support this to move forward, and we have a very clear action plan. So we know what we're going to be doing, how decisions are going to be made, okay? What's beautiful about this particular methodology here, if you haven't seen this before, is that if you look on the right-hand side, let's imagine that you are hearing people say, well, you know, if I wait around long enough, this will go, this too shall pass, right? You know, we do this, we try a new program, we never get anywhere, it's just start, stop, start, stop. In other words, a lot of false starts. So if you're hearing that kind of language in the organization around false starts, well, guess what? First place you should look is, do I have a clear action plan in place? Do I have a clear action plan? Clearly articulated milestones. I've communicated that plan. People know where we're headed. They know how we're getting there. They know how decisions are made. Have I filled in this gap? Okay. So utilizing this tool, you can quickly diagnose where you should focus some time. All right. So all of these elements in an ideal world, you are operating, of course, across the top here. In an ideal world, over time, any one or some of these can start to drift, and in which case you will hear certain things in the organization or see certain behaviors in the organization. That becomes your evidence with which then you can reverse engineer again and figure out. In this particular case, if things are just slowly moving along, question, what's the motivation? Have I clearly answered that? The motivation, the incentive. This is a great link to heritage as well. Who are we? Okay. All right. So I want you to walk away with that tool in your toolkit as a change management professional now. Now let's pay attention to a little bit of our BPM folks. So those of you that are on the call and going through this certification today and the certification series from the perspective of your business process methodology and developing a continuous improvement culture. So remember, what we talk about is that unstoppable process culture is one where we have our processes are well understood, they're consistently executed, and where employees are engaged and they're contributing to improving processes over time, right? So this would be that ideal state, our arrival point, if you will. All right. So from that perspective, let's take a really quick look at how we can leverage the formal case to enable our BPM and our continuous improvement culture, okay? Again, this applies to any other change initiative as well. All right, so first piece, let's go to this model. All right, we know that this is what serious change looks like. We've got all 5 of these components well-defined, in place, well-articulated, well-communicated. We're systematically, with intention and with attention, working the change through the organization. All right, so as we bring those pieces together, ultimately, this is where we can now start to drive the culture that is delivering that process orientation. It is delivering and accelerating productivity, performance, and profit. Okay, so that's how we want to be taking this tool set and these best practices and specifically applying them to our BPM environment, our continuous improvement environment. All right. Okay, so keeping all of that in front of us. Let's just wrap up, see what kind of questions we might have, anything that's come in, and it looks like at the moment, no specific questions at the moment. I'll tell you what, again, I forgot to remind everyone at the beginning of the session, but please always remember this. You can always type in your questions, just drop them into the chat space, or shoot me a quick question as well. We'll get those answered, and then I'll also, of course, follow up with you afterwards as well. So I know we've had a couple of great conversations, some one-on-one conversations subsequent as well. Let's take a look at next week's topic as we continue on in our process here around our process, or our change management professional certification, the whole series here as well. Our next topic is around creating ownership. So now that we've built the case and we've got enrollment around it, how do we actually get people to own their role in this? Okay, and that's a big element. You know, when people start taking on the ownership of it, I'm sure you've been in scenarios where you've had that happen and you believe now at this point that it truly is being adopted, that new approach, that new program, that new methodology, it's being adopted into the organization. And that is that sense of ownership that is starting to come forward. So how do we create that? Okay, so we're going to take a dive into this one here, and we're creating successful change. I believe that is about building a connection between people's hearts and minds so that they really have a sense of the ownership, the program ownership, and a commitment to the outcome. It becomes theirs, okay? And so to achieve that, we're going to explore 3 tips that will help you gain that leverage and ultimately the results that you're going after, all right? So first, leaders of large change programs, yourselves, must overperform and must be the zealots in this, all right? So we're going to take a deep dive. What does that look like? The next one is that our goal here is to create critical mass among the workforce in favor of the change. So Malcolm Gladwell, for example, talks about the tipping point, hitting that spot, right? When does that happen, that all of a sudden we've hit critical mass and now it starts to take off on its own, okay? Well, for some of you that I've worked with in the ProMap world, we know what that feeling is like, right? It's when people start pulling and you have more pull than capacity to serve, okay? So we want to actually intentionally create that, okay? So we're going to explore how to do that, to create that critical mass. And then the third element is around ownership, how we can engage others to actually get involved in identifying problems and crafting solutions, not that are part of the new program, but helping to identify problems and crafting solutions having to do with adoption, having to do with change management. So we actually want to start enrolling people into the change management system itself, okay? It's a very subtle shift in there and extremely powerful. So we'll explore that a little bit more in our next session as well. All right, if you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out in advance reach out in between now and your next session, you can email me at info@pendolinogroup.com or diana@pendolinogroup.com. Feel free to also go online and schedule time directly right onto my scheduler, onto my calendar if you want to do a quick 20 minutes together. And our sessions are placed out on YouTube for you to take a look at in preparation as well. So feel free to do that. Thank you so much for joining me for this session. I look forward to our next one. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.